Good morning and welcome to everyone from around the world who's joining us today. We've got participants from at least 3 or 4 continents. Thank you very much for taking the trouble to join us. I am Chairman of the South African Chamber of Commerce, and we are hosting a really interesting morning debate. So I'm looking forward to a very interesting hour together with the two gentlemen that are joining us. And as they say, it's the early bird that catches the first worm. It's not often we start a webinar at this time in the morning in the UK environment. So thank you for those in the UK for getting up as early as South Africans always do and joining us. The future of South Africa is in the hands of our youth. We hear this being said many, many times, and how true it is. And educating them is critical to a successful future for South Africa and for the individuals in question. And it's in this light that South African Chambers engaged with several South African universities to understand what they are doing for the future of the country and for the individual youth, and what they are doing as ambassadors once they move out into the world, as so many people do. And as the gentleman in question, Vim, who has returned to South Africa, there are many of the great and good of South Africa's business that have been graduated through Stellenbosch University, which is the university we are showcasing this morning. This was planned to be a breakfast in London, a couple of invited guests to understand and to learn about the things we're going to be sharing and discussing today, but also to chat to our two guests about their cycle ride that they would have done from Brighton to London. Now, actually, in this particular case, Professor Vin De Villiers managed to circumvent with many, many days and weeks in between to get to the UK to actually do the race in question on Sunday. So he has got his 55 miles under the belt. And to support him, Justice Edwin Cameron did a cycle ride in Johannesburg for the fundraising that they are putting together for the university and for the education of the children, which we'll talk about at the end again. So thank you very much for taking the trouble to get here. Vim is with us here in the UK at the moment. Edwin is in Johannesburg. And I would like to begin by first introducing Professor Vin De Villiers, who is Rector and Vice Chancellor of Stellenbosch University. He also serves as the Vice Chair of University South Africa and as a board member of the Association of Commonwealth Universities. I was reading up on him, a really, really interesting gentleman, this one. As a youngster, he was a very high achiever at school with cum laude results, and progressed to study at Stellenbosch University, where he studied medicine and where his father was the Dean of Law at the university. He followed his medical career, which then took him to Oxford in the UK, Kentucky in the US, and 18 years later returned to Cape Town University and ultimately came home to Stellenbosch University in 2014. He's committed to supporting students to achieve their potential. And it's at this point I would like to invite Professor Vin De Villiers to share a few minutes with us about whatever it is you choose to share.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Sharon. And it's a real pleasure to spend some time with you and the members of the South African Chamber of Commerce. So I'm Vin De Villiers. I'm the Rector Vice Chancellor of Stellenbosch University. And it has certainly been a whirlwind over the past few weeks, traveling to the UK. And we spent 10 days in Germany on university business. And the purpose of this is to meet with donors, with alumni, with universities, with folks, also the German Chamber of Commerce in Berlin, and ministries in Baden-Württemberg and in Rhineland-Westphalia. And it's really about how Stellenbosch University has handled COVID-19 in this very challenging time, as this webinar is entitled Opportunities and Challenges for Stellenbosch University and South Africa. And I must really say there are many, many opportunities. But I must say one thing that I have been really impressed with is how many alumni we have overseas and the mark that they make overseas, the contribution that they make overseas. So we made our way to London, as you said, and I participated in the London to Brighton cycle ride, not Brighton to London. That would be uphill. So, but nevertheless, it was a very pleasant Sunday morning ride, and I believe that we've achieved what we wanted to do, and that is to really support our students that struggle financially to really unlock all their potential and to achieve what they can. So at Stellenbosch University, we have 32,000 students, 2/3 undergraduate, 1/3 postgraduate, and there are many exciting events and initiatives that we undertake. I think one of the reasons why we are here in London, that Justice Cameron also participated in last night, was our Faculty of Law centenary. So that was a lovely event. Justice Cameron delivered the keynote address. And then I think also of some interest perhaps to the Chamber of Commerce would be some recent initiatives that we launched in an effort to really break down the silos, the traditional silos that one has in a university. So we founded a school for data science and computational thinking about 2 years ago. It really transcends faculties, multidisciplinary, cross-faculty, interdisciplinary types of research and interaction with industry. And that has really been very successful. And then secondly is about 2 months ago, we founded a school for climate studies. We're really looking at food security, renewable energy, and all these different aspects that come with climate change. And our Faculty of Agricultural Sciences, Natural Sciences, Medicine, they're all at the forefront of this. So it's a pleasure to interact with you all this morning. And I'm now going to introduce our keynote speaker. Our keynote speaker is Justice Cameron, Edwin Cameron. He is the Chancellor of Stellenbosch University. He is also an alumnus of Stellenbosch University. He studied law there and then studied elsewhere, as well as he got a Rhodes Scholarship and went to Oxford. And he's a very esteemed alumnus. He served as a judge in the Supreme Court of Appeals, as well as the Constitutional Court, and he's known as a fearless and forthright human rights activist, and as a HIV activist. And it is always a pleasure to listen to him and to hear his very clear thoughts on matters and some of the challenges that face South Africa at the moment. But certainly we, as you also noted, many opportunities, and I can really attest to all these opportunities that we discovered, saw during this trip of mine, but also that I hope to unlock in the future. So over to Justice Cameron.
Good morning, Vim. Good morning, Sharon. Good morning, all participants. I wish to remedy an omission that the rector made in his introducing me. He failed to mention my fearlessness in battling the hills of Johannesburg's cradle of humankind on Sunday morning. When he was gliding down the hill from London to Brighton, I was battling up many hills. Joburg is inveterately hilly. It was a great joy. And like everything Vim and I do for Stellenbosch, and I want to honor Sharon in her pro bono capacity as CEO of the Chamber of Commerce. Sharon, I think that what you are doing really epitomizes what we are seeking from so many of our wonderful participants this morning, which is that kind of commitment to what we are seeking to achieve. So Vim and I did it on Sunday morning. I'm claiming to have had more hills than he did, but both of us did it with great joy and energy. As Vim has said, I want to pause to recognize a moment of peril for our country. It's been nearly 18 months into the COVID epidemic. All of us have suffered deaths and bereavements, illness. Our health system has been under strain. It has been economically devastating for our country. One of the estimates is that we lost jobs for 500,000 people, perhaps more, but it's been a very great setback. In addition, we have dysfunction in many of our public, governmental, independent institutions. We have difficulty in reforming government management and output, delivery, service delivery. What is government doing? How efficiently is it doing it? Is it fulfilling its mandate? in securing services, basic services, often more elaborate services in South Africa. And then, of course, to me, as someone who retired from the judiciary just 2 years ago, we also have the judiciary in transition. There are 5 vacancies in the Constitutional Court. One of them is for the Chief Justiceship. The President just last week, Thursday, announced the process for the selection of Chief Justice Mogoeng's successor. That process will take place over the next 3 weeks because Chief Justice Mogoeng steps down on the 11th of October. And then, of course, the last issue that I mentioned in my catalogue of perilous moments is the insurrection, the Zuma-inspired mass insurrection and mass looting of July, largely confined to our 2 heavily commercialized industrial output centers, eThekwini and Johannesburg, and of course, the crucial N3 lifeline between those 2 cities, contained and now in order again, but nevertheless, a disturbing pointer for all of us in South Africa. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very happy that Sharon has arranged this, and I'm very sorry I can't be in London. And I think that despite the ravages of COVID, the fact that we are meeting here this morning, that so many of you have signed up, which I honor and thank you for, is an indication of how our resolve is, despite this, to keep going, and also to show how we really live in a single world. I deeply regret the Johnson government's failure to remove South Africa from the red list. We hope that many of you, especially in the UK, will be able to come for Christmas holidays, visit your families. We're all longing to see you. Bring your pounds, bring your euros, bring your dollars, but bring your hearts to South Africa as well. Having said that, a candid moment of sobriety about all the challenges we face, which are substantial. Let us take a moment. I've got a friend, Paul Theron, who's a very smart fund manager. He runs a well-performing fund called Best Act. He says, what are you comparing us with? Are you comparing us with Turkey, China, Russia? And if we look at what is happening in South Africa, we can also look to Europe, Hungary, Poland, Belarus, Russia. We have significant challenges to democracy, the rule of law, and constitutionalism in all of those countries. On our continent, Tunisia and Rwanda, in Asia, Burma, and even Thailand. So that is the international context in which we as South Africans are struggling in moments of peril to go forward. And we have considerable advantages. The first I mention is that we have quite extraordinary media, untrammeled in freedom of speech, unlike almost anywhere else on the rest of the continent of Africa. We have an NGO sector, which is undoubtedly the most vibrant in Africa, in all areas: education, women's rights, children's rights, the environment. We have strong non-governmental organizations, often supported by voluntary contributions and by voluntary contributions of labor, which are helping to transform our country. Particularly within the NGO sector, we have a tradition that goes back to the 1970s, when the Legal Resources Center and the Center for Applied Legal Studies, where I worked under apartheid, in opposing apartheid, when they were founded in the late 70s. We have those organizations, as well as Lawyers for Human Rights. We have the Center for Child Law at the University of Pretoria. We have Freedom Under Law. We have the Helen Suzman Foundation, the Kgalema Motlanthe Foundation, the Nelson Mandela Foundation, and the Kati Katrala Foundation, which band together to take stands of principle, pointing the way forward practically that our country should move in order to achieve its constitutional objectives. And of course, let me speak with candor about the Constitutional Court. It's under attack from the right and from the left. On the left, we have intemperate statements by the supporters of former President Jacob Zuma, his foundation, his family, and we also have intemperate statements from Mr. Julius Malema. On the right, we have almost equally intemperate statements from Ms. Helen Zille attacking the courts. In all these cases, I believe that those attacks, and here I include Professor Koos Milan from the University of Pretoria. They're either unscrupulous for political partisan ends, or if not unscrupulous, and I make this exception, they are wholly at variance with the facts which show that the Constitutional Court and the other courts have, with some spectacular bad apples, and I'm happy to address those during the question time, Sharon, the courts have shown an untrammeled absence of partisanship and a high level of professional commitment and professional dedication and focus in implementing the Constitution. I'm a gay man, a proudly gay man. It's important still, while prejudice still exists, to speak about LGBTIQ issues. I'm also living with HIV. 24 years ago, in about 6 weeks' time, I started on antiretrovirals, and I'm living today and joyfully part of the Stellenbosch renaissance that Vin De Villiers has so successfully been managing. I'm living here today because of the ARVs, and I mention that for a reason. We had to struggle against pricing, the big farmers, treatment action campaigns, Zaki Ahmed. We had to struggle against a bigger nightmare, President Mbeki's denialism. And what got us through that? Let me tell you that today, as I sit here, having taken my ARVs an hour ago, I'm one of 5 million South Africans. There are about 7.5 million of us living with HIV. Nearly 5 million of us owe our lives to ARVs, publicly provided, by far the world's largest publicly provided ARV program. How did we get it? Principled activism, individual, heroic, unflinching conduct, a Bill of Rights, which allowed the treatment action campaign to organize, to speak out, to take marches, to challenge, to be unflinching, courageous judges, and then a government, a submissive government, even President Mbeki, despite his proud ambitions as an intellectual in the present, he buckled down when the Constitutional Court ordered him to start making ARVs available. So, principled judges, brave activism, a strong Bill of Rights, and a courageous citizenry. And then we have my point, Sharon, my main point. Universities, the tertiary education sector. I'm enormously proud to be associated with Stellenbosch. 2 years ago, I accepted nomination to be elected as Chancellor. And the reasons were that Stellenbosch is in almost every way on the way strongly up in research output, in the diversity of its leadership and its key teaching institutions. Vim has, as he indicated, introduced many independent and innovative units and institutes at Stellenbosch. I don't have faith in these much vaunted Times Higher Education, Shanghai, all these are rankings of universities, and you go and look every year and you see where are you, have you moved up from 200 to 199, but what they do show, credibly and reliably, is which way an institution is going. Is it heading down or is it heading up? Stellenbosch, for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, has been heading up, and under Vim's leadership, it's been heading up more decisively. Let me mention a few names. These are really just picks that Peter Swart, who's also on the screen, and I made. Professor Kiantri Moodley is head of an ethics division in the medical school op Tygerberg. Ek wil eintlik vir 'n paar woorde in Afrikaans praat, maar dit is ook vir my baie belangrik. As 'n eerste taal en moedertaal Afrikaans sprekende, dat ek in elke toespraak 'n paar woorde opsigtelik in Afrikaans sê, want dis ook ons doelstelling op Stellenbosch om vir Afrikaans te koester en te bevorder. She's been at the forefront of so much of the debate about vaccine mandates. Let me tell you with particular pride, a colleague of mine from the late 1980s and early 1990s at Kels at Wits in the human rights struggle was a young woman called Thuli Madonsela. Wow. She became public protector. She had an unrivaled 7-year spell as public protector. Her report on Nkandla, which then came to the Constitutional Court, giving us Chief Justice Mogoeng's historic judgment Zuma and telling Parliament to do its duty. Her report is what saved us from going the way of so many other countries, broken countries, dispirited countries. And we're asking your help to support people like Tuli Madonsela, like Kimantri Moodley, like Jonathan Johnson, an outstanding voice of moral courage in the education sector, not just warning us against the wrong things, but telling us how to do things better. And other people, Michael Lecordier just pops into my mind. Michael Lecordier is a wonderful man at Stellenbosch, also speaking about education. Paul Emsley, wow, he did this, I know from Peter Swart. He did the portrait of the Duchess of Cambridge that is now one of the most viewed in the National Portrait Gallery just off Trafalgar Square. Dion Meyer, who doesn't know Dion Meyer? We're so proud that he's an alumnus and that he's attached to us. His books have been translated into 27 languages internationally. So we are creating palpable improvements at Stellenbosch. We are looking forward. We are doing so in conditions of less than ideal national culture, but we are part of the commitment to the rule of law, to constitutionalism, to good order, to progress, to social justice.
You're back?
I had finished, Sharon, and I'm absolutely delighted to I apologize to all our participants. And thank you so much for the time, Sharon. I'm greatly looking forward to the Q&A and to the chat.
Please just share with us a little bit about your early days, the foundation of what made the man that went through the justice system, making so much positive influence for the country and for individuals in a human rights way. How did you begin?
For a white family in the late 1950s, and I spent nearly 5 years in a children's home, which gave me an insight into child deprivation and poverty. But my big breaks came from Pretoria Boys High and Stellenbosch and being educated. And of course, they were all white institutions at that point. As Wim has mentioned, I got from Stellenbosch to Oxford. And then, to my horror, I discovered that I was queer. So those are the determinants of my adult commitment to Stellenbosch, Sharon. A sense of poverty, of class, rather than only race, but an awareness of race, the importance of race in making my breakthrough unjustly when other people were held out. And then HIV stigma, the stigma of being queer, the stigma of HIV. And the way in which we can, through positive engagement, through confronting our own fears and ignorances and ostracisms, the way in which we can really make the world a better place. This is not a Pollyanna-like pie in the sky thing. It's a practical thing that you start it with every day. And so that is who I am here today, and it's a joy to be here.
One thing we chatted about last week when we were having our briefing get together and getting to know one another, you talked about the real struggle South Africa is dealing with at an emotional and practical level around the anti-vaxxers view and the degree to which that is occurring. And I almost bring that back as a correlation to the misinformation you were talking about with HIV, AIDS, and Mbeki's era. Please just give us some insights as to how South Africa is doing. I understand we are improving as a country, and this whole anti-vaxxer situation that is so predominant.
Sharon, I'm going to start with a grumble. We've got a higher vaccination rate than both Pakistan and Kenya, who were removed. So this is...
Who does the maths?
So what the Johnson government in the UK is up to is not. That's the grumble. We are making good progress. Let me tell you why this is important to me. And you already mentioned it, Sharon. When I started ARVs, we didn't know the details of would they work in Kailicha, would they work in Lusikisiki, would they work in informal settlements, would they work for kids? We know all the answers to that. They work fantastically. But the science was pointing us that way. The science is pointing us the way of universal vaccination. And that's why I speak out about the vaccine skeptics, the anti-vaxxers, as dangerous as the denialists were to our country 20, 25 years ago, who cost us hundreds of thousands of lives. But we're doing well. And I want to boast a little bit within the prison system. We with the Minister of Justice, who's a smart guy, by the way, remember the name Ronald Lamola, depending on what happens in the ANC, footnotes and square brackets there. But prisoners were immediately offered vaccination, rightly so, congregate settings. And we've achieved almost an 81% uptake amongst incarcerated persons, which is fantastic. Our staff within the agency I head, the Independent Correctional Supervision Agency, we've got it just over 60%, and the correctional services staff is around about the same. So we're doing well, we're proud of that. Thanks for asking.
Thank you very much. And it will be good to see that the evidence that people who are on the anti-vax view globally, some of them are not surviving. A gentleman passed away in the US the other day, strong anti-vaxxer, and is not here to continue his campaign. It is something we have to take seriously. I didn't want to take it, but I have, because I'd rather be alive. And it's just finding that balance of what is important to you, life or death, which is a story you've been through in your life already. What's taken you into the prison services area in your retirement? Why there? You could have done so many things. What took you there? Circumstance? Or?
Sharon, you know, when I was in the children's home in Queenstown in the early 1960s, my father was actually imprisoned for car theft. So I've always had a sense of the humiliation, the stigma, the deprivation, the punitive nature of the law in locking people up, but also the alleviating and ameliorating and healing propensities of the law as well, when the law is put to social justice. So I've been intrigued by prisons, which are a relatively novel phenomenon. We have only had incarceration on a mass scale for the last 200 years for reasons. You in the UK, despite your moral superiority, exported your alleged criminals to Australia, of course. So now we have prisons, and it's a moral problem at the heart of most modern societies. Why do you have prisons, and why do we have the world's 12th largest prison population? It's something that's not helping with our violent crime, which has been ticking up slowly since 2011. So prisons are in essence quite appalling institutions. You lock up large numbers of adult men in conditions of close confinement without agency. And I think they can be improved. They should be improved. Rehabilitation, education, prison conditions. We recently visited the 3 big supermax prisons where people are held in what is in effect solitary confinement. We're doing something about that right now. So thank you for asking that, Sharon. It's one of the areas in our country where we really can make a daily difference, a difference of practical effect to the people who are suffering or are affected by injustice.
You were referencing earlier about the Constitutional Court and some of the challenges it's facing at the moment. And also looking back at your own personal legal career through the justice system of South Africa, what were some of the defining moments for you personally during that career in the justice system?
Sharon, I was appointed by President Mandela at the end of 1994. I was one of the first 4 High Court judges appointed under the Constitution. One of the other 4 was Judge President Hlophe, who I fear is one of the bad apples I was mentioning, and I was inviting people to ask me there. But amazingly, the process has been grinding slowly. He's been found guilty of gross misconduct. The Judicial Service Commission have resolved that he should be removed, a historic first for our democracy. He and I were appointed together at the end of 1995. Sharon, it was quite an honor to serve, but it was tough stuff. You have to work hard, and the greatest honor, of course, was the last 11 years in the Constitutional Court. I want to say just one quick thing, Sharon. When I got to the Constitutional Court, the commentator said there are camps. You know, there's Mchweng, Jafta, Zondo on the one side, and there's Cameron and Moseneke and Froneman on the other. Well, it's not unusual in appellate courts to have rancorous divisions. We had rancorous divisions that the commentators have forgotten about in talking about the dissents. I think the wrong-headed, misdirected dissents from Justice Sisi Kampepe's brave, outspoken judgment on Friday. So obviously working in a large appellate body is tough, but it's also inspiring. And the one thing I can say is that the attacks on individual judges, apart from the bad apples, the rare bad apples, I think are wholly misdirected, and I think shameful. The political leaders who are impugning the judiciary should either shut up, or their parties should ensure that they shut up, in my respectful view, because they are doing untold damage. They're doing damage to their own futures, because I can vouch for the personal integrity, the commitment, the focus, and the non-partisanship of all the judges that I worked with very, very rare exceptions.
Thank you. That's quite inspiring to hear, and I appreciate your insights into that, both positive and insightful on the bad apple side. Very interesting. Just staying with related to government environment, there's some very strong public-private partnerships being formed, and there are a lot of bodies where the private sector is trying to work with government, and I use the word trying in capital letters. And I understand there are a lot of challenges to business knowledge and business capability that is really struggling to reach the ground of the outcome of their efforts. Any advice to this world, or any insights into business and government and the success thereof?
Sharon, do you want me to burst into tears on a call with well over 100 alumni? Sharon, I think some well-directed kicks and butts are in order. You know, I think we've got to do things, Sharon. I'm not going to talk this, sweet talk this. I think we need, how do you say in Afrikaans? Gryp hom om die nek, leadership. And for various reasons, I'm not one of those who likes to kick President Ramaphosa. He has had a rough time in stabilizing his leadership after the pipsqueak election win at the end of 2017. But at the same time, I think much more could have been done in decisive leadership, in facilitating small businesses, in making a better enabling business environment to the good. Business leaders are talking out. In the mining sector, FNB last week said we've got huge piles of ZAR. We've got piles of investment cash. We want public projects to invest it in. So they're talking out, and I think we will see greater leadership and greater development, greater opportunities for both small and large businesses to develop. We have to.
We've got to employ the people. We've got to give them purpose. We've got to give them a country that they are proud in having, and an infrastructure that they're proud of. And the only way we do that is education and employment, which are the things that you have worked towards and are working with at this point in your career. So it is just so frustrating to see it not seeing the light of day in the way that it should. Before I pick up some of the questions in the chat too, because there's some very good ones that are coming through, I'd just like to pick on two things that I'll ask, and you can then sort of put them together because they have a correlation. Is we had the insurrection in July. It was frightening. It was devastating. It suddenly stopped. And we obviously sitting in this position is, what was that all about? What might be lurking in the wings that could be causing some stress to us? And you then talked a little earlier when you were talking on your earlier presentation about the media of South Africa being one of the most open and transparent and forthright in terms of information dissemination. I don't know if the two are related, but there are two questions in there. Do we have your insights?
Just spell out the two questions, Sharon.
The one is the insurrection in July.
Mm.
Tell us about how people felt, what we
Yeah.
think was actually happening on the ground.
Mm.
Why did it suddenly stop? It just seems very odd. It blew up out of nowhere and disappeared and didn't actually spread countrywide, which one thought it could have done. It hasn't. And then the other question I'd like you to cover is just the media and the openness of the media. And I just wondered, was the media having a role in that or not?
Sharon, let me start with the second question. I think our media is one of our proudest achievements in democratic South Africa, a media that was heavily gemuilband. It's a lovely Afrikaans word, heavily muffled under apartheid. And the media, only in the sense of social media, of course, there's no doubt that the insurrection was instigated by social media accounts on WhatsApp and Instagram. And the evidence for that is coming forward. What happened, Sharon? It's a complex of issues that happened. I believe that there was a failure of national intelligence, there was a failure of military intelligence, and that is one of the kick-butt things that I think the presidency has to do and has to fix. One of the issues that I speak about when I speak about prisons and our wrong-headed sentencing regime is the importance of police intelligence. You can't get anywhere unless you have a well-functioning, efficient, integrity-based police intelligence system. So there was a lot of that. I think it was instigated by supporters of President Zuma. And the interesting thing, Sharon, was when I was in the children's home at Queenstown, I was 8 or 9 when Paul Koch, our Xhosa speaking participants will forgive me because I can't do that Xhosa cue, was prevalent in the Eastern Cape. And we used to look up at Madeira Mountain from the children's home because we believed that the Xhosa warriors would be coming over there to deluge the white town of Queenstown. So I'm talking about white fear. And those 2 days, those 3 days in July were provoking a lot of middle class fear. What used to be white fear is now much more class-based. And it didn't happen. It abated, partly because the working class and dispossessed people themselves said, we rely on shopping malls, you will not come here. There was one mall in Soweto that was saved by people living around it who said, we will person, woman, the barricades for 24 hours a day. Taxi drivers in Gqeberha, another Xhosa clique that I don't manage, in East London, stopped it from happening. So we had mass looting in 2 big sensitive centres, but that never spread to the Western Cape, the Northern Cape, the Free State, or elsewhere. And we still need an accounting for that. As a lawyer, I believe in accounting. We are waiting for it to happen. We're waiting for the big fry. We don't want the small fry, we want the big fry. As with police intelligence, we want the big fry, and we're waiting for that to happen.
Thank you for those insights. It's amazing how you're involved in the fact we actually had an advisory board conversation around it shortly afterwards. And you do always used to forget some of the facts that you've just brought back to me and brought back so vividly. And also, I think some people got caught up in it and then suddenly realized how stupid it was, as well as the communities saying, no, hold on, this is our bread and butter, this is how we live. There's one question in the chat that talks about, and so first of all, thanks you for your brilliant session, which I mustn't leave out. Do you think the civil procedure in the South African courts is fit for purpose, or might it benefit from an overhaul along the lines of CPR in England?
Wow, the answer is yes. And let me tell you something here. Let me take it back to anecdote and interesting developments. One of the front runners for the Chief Justiceship, together with Deputy Chief Justice Zondo and together with Supreme Court of Appeal President Mandisa Maya, both of whom are most impressive candidates of integrity and accomplishment and judicial experience. The one I want to single out is Judge President Dunstan Mlamba, a person of incredible courage. He gave the order on that Sunday afternoon, telling the South African government to arrest Omar al-Bashir when he entered the country with an ICC warrant having his name on it. And of course, government allowed him to slip out of the country within an hour after the order was issued. So Judge President Mlamba, a person of extraordinary courage, but also for the last 9 years, he has run the Gauteng courts. When the lockdown hit, Judge President Mlamba was the one who initiated the online court hearings. So I'm avoiding the question a bit because I don't want to go into the details of what those reforms will require. But if we're lucky enough to get someone of the caliber, the administrative capacities of Judge President Mlamba to lead the judiciary, I believe that we will be moving in that way.
Thank you for that insight. It wasn't an easy question. And another one that is slightly differently focused as well. One of our recently joined members who joined through the KZN launch that we had last week and is intending to help the manufacturing and entrepreneurial sector in KwaZulu-Natal. And wants any insights that you've got through, because you have a very entrepreneurial side to you. How do people like him and the Chamber get more involved in applying their skills and experience to help turn South Africa's economy?
Sharon, it's you know, I often say remorsefully, I've never created an enterprise in my life. I've helped with NGOs, I've been in law practice and academia and the judiciary. So I honor those who have risked their capital and their time in creating opportunities. But I think there's a commonality, Sharon. You've got to organize, as you are in the SACC. You've got to organize in KZN. You've got to reach the Premier. You've got to twist arms. You've got to sit down and persuade. So the commonality between business opportunities and persuading idle, inert, or misdirected politicians to do the right thing is that you've got to pressure them together. And the same is true in education, in gender-based violence, in library books in schools, in children, in LGBTIQ equality, and in AIDS and HIV. It's the same formula. You've got to get up, you've got to organize, you've got to achieve solidarity, you've got to move forward, you've got to pressure and demand.
I like that last one. Along those lines, there's a question that's come in from the chat line rather than the Q&A session, which is very linked to what you've just been saying now, and says, how, using your words of wisdom, how can South Africa improve its racial relations and prevent inequality and discrimination? Quite a wide statement. You've been very involved in very different aspects of human rights, which you've referred to over periods of time. How would you like to share that with us? Or with us?
I want to say two contradictory things, Sharon. The contradiction is that we have spectacular instances of spectacularly stupid white racism that still pop up. And I think that they get the focus they need. I'm not saying they get unnecessary attention and focus, but the unknown truth is that across our urban areas, across our residential areas, not just upper middle class, but middle class, lower middle class, and working class residential areas, there's integration. I concede that our townships and informal settlements are still overwhelmingly African Black. But outside those, there is a measure, schooling. Suburban schools are now preponderantly Black. There has been a white flight to private schooling, but there's also been an elite Black flight to private schooling. So the point I'm making is that the surveys show that most South Africans, despite the penny sparrow instances, which are real, and they reflect a reality of a lingering holdover from 350 years of white supremacism until the Constitution only 27 years ago. Those instances are given more attention than the underlying reality that most South Africans believe. Two things: that race relations have improved, that is established, I can say that this morning. And secondly, that the most important issues are jobs, healthcare, crime, peace, home security. And most South Africans, township, rural South Africans, put race relations 5, 6, or 7.
Mhm.
So let me get flamed for saying that. I've said it, and I've said it on record, and I'll say it again.
Thank you very much, Edwin. That's really interesting. Before I ask you the next question, I alert all of the audience to a insights that Marius Kutzer has put to everybody on the chat line about vaccinations and some of the technical content there. Please have a look at it. I'm not going to do it on air because it's not what we're spending time with, but it is extremely worth reading. So I leave that for you guys to talk about. The area that I would like to just have a chat about now, you were talking about, Vin was talking and alluding to the changes that are occurring within Stellenbosch itself from a demographic structure perspective. Let's use it because I'm sure it's changing in many aspects, age, digital, as well as race, language, those kind of things. Tell us about the journey and the challenges that the university is facing in that process of transition and transformation, which any company will learn from, because we're having in the UK a huge amount of transformation having to occur. And whether it's cultural or whether it's digital or whether it's demographics, they're all difficult.
And for each of us, Sharon, you know, it's a daily task to confront our own ignorances, our own prejudices, our own absences of knowledge. So, Sharon, let me slightly misform your question and talk about language. Let's talk about Afrikaans, my moedertaal, my eerste taal. And 2 years ago, we handed down next month. I wrote the judgment. I'd already stepped down from the court. So colleagues of mine handed it down in early October, just 2 years ago, which okayed Stellenbosch's 2016 language policy. And the basis, the core of the Constitutional Court's decision was that you can shift the emphasis from being a primary Afrikaans language institution to having English in the foreground, but still offering a substantial recognized Afrikaans, proudly recognized heritage Afrikaans for the 7 million first language Afrikaans speakers who dwarf the first language English speaker. You can make that shift if your Afrikaans language policy is excluding Black kids. And the evidence before us was unequivocal. That having interpreters and summaries at the end of the Afrikaans lectures were making Black kids feel marginalized and excluded. That was unequivocal evidence. So Stellenbosch has adapted its language policy. We're going through that process right now for the 2021 iteration, 5 years later. And the objective, as you've said, Sharon, is to create an environment in which everyone is welcome. You can still do your entire undergraduate degree in Stellenbosch and Afrikaans. That's a fact that's not well known. And we love it. I'm proud of it. I go around, mense groet my op Afrikaans en ek is trots daarop. The Woordfees is being recorded right now and next week, being virtually recorded. So, Sharon, you asked me a broad question about diversity and inclusion in companies. It's like everything, it's bite by bite, but it starts with the right information, the right rigting, which way are you heading, and then the right day-to-day decision making.
One of our last questions. Can education and pedagogies of care possibly be the vehicle that SA and the world need to transform? Thus, more investment in education, question mark.
Wow, Sharon.
Asking
Let
a
me
little one
grab
for
your
Ian.
question by its ears and turn it upside down. One of the things that I've said recently is that at a dinner in London a few years ago, I sat next to a bishop who had been a bishop in Nigeria. And he spoke about the research output of the great Nigerian universities at Kano, at Ibadan, Lagos, and Southeast Nigeria. And he said that in the last 20 or 30 years, that has diminished markedly. I'm being careful because I'm a lawyer, and also because I've tried to Google the research output of Nigerian universities, and it confirms what the bishop said to me. And part of the difficulty is that the resourced classes of Nigeria stopped investing in the tertiary sector and stopped investing in the secondary sector. The Nigerians who had access to the oil millions and billions sent their kids to the United States and to England to school. So we've got a Nigerian diaspora of spectacularly talented, expressive, and beautiful people who are not in Nigeria. We're not making the same mistake in South Africa. We have a Stellenbosch that is expanding its world-reaching research output, that's appointing more world-class people. I mentioned just a few of them. So I've taken your question by its ears and I've shaken it a bit, but the answer is yes.
Thank you so much. Last question, because I want to end something like this on the really positive note of many of the conversations we've shared today, is as in the title of our presentation, South Africa is a country of opportunity. It always is. It's that silver lining. We go to the edge of the precipice, we come back. We all have a full glass, least of all a half full glass. South Africa is just a place of smiles, colors, smells. It has so much opportunity. Could you tell us a little bit about the trajectory South Africa can be on?
Yeah. Sharon, to reaffirm where I started, it's a moment of peril, but it's a moment of our agency and our opportunity and our responsibility. Those of us who are Stellenbosch graduates, those of us who have jobs, I've just got a book which a Rhodes Scholar, Jess Auerbach, has produced. You can Google her. It's a book of stories of solidarity, interracial, interclass solidarity during the lockdown. We can do things, Sharon, and our trajectory is definitely forward. I'm not a Pollyanna. I'm not gilding anything, but it's up to us. We have the opportunity, wherever we are, in London, across the Americas, or the rest of Africa. We as Stellenbosch connected graduates and others have an opportunity in many ways, by sponsoring a student, by making a contribution, by speaking out, by forming an organization, by pressuring people to set business free to do its work. We have opportunities every day. Let's start now.
On that note, I'm going to ask Stuart just to put onto the chat, please, thank you very much, the fundraising links for the Chancellor and for Justice Cameron. They set out an objective of trying to raise £20,000. I only found out about this in the tech check as we were starting the event. And due to Edwin, who spent such a wonderful hour with us, not in the saddle, getting the sore bum, as Vim said he was feeling after his 55 miles of journeying to Brighton, is that their fundraising opportunities, the number of riders involved, was seriously cut by the COVID restrictions on travel. If anybody is mindful of it, that links are there. Please, I'll leave the webinar open a few seconds after we officially close so that you can pick up everything. But I have to say there's some really interesting insights that are in the chat if people want to read them quickly. We've dealt with most of the questions either in what you have spoken about, so I've not repeated the question. And if there's any I have missed, I do apologize, but our hour is now up by a minute. Thank you very much, Justice Edwin Cameron. You have been so insightful, so interesting. It's moments like this that the hour we spoke on last time, the hour now, the bit beforehand, we could go on for hours and hours and hours. And I do look forward to having a moment's time where we will be face to face, having that breakfast or some other meal or coffee or wine or whatever it's going to be, and sharing some further stories together. And we look forward to welcoming you back to the Chamber and to an event, hopefully in person, hosted by one of our Platinum members, which was all set up and ready for you. So I look forward to a long-going relationship with Stellenbosch University.
Lovely, Sharon, and thank you for
Any
your
last words?
focus and pro bono time, and thank you to everyone for your time. It's been a complete joy to be here. Thank you.